Hello, welcome everybody. I thought I'd put together a short guide on some of the speedrunning tips since I see a lot of questions about it, and general gameplay tips for the game. It's a really great demo. The Kenny-san team did awesome, and I'm really looking forward to the full game. So what will we cover? What to do if you haven't beaten Fast 9 yet, like you're still progressing through the game and need help to beat Fast 9. um, what to do after you've beaten it and you still want to go faster, and speedrun single stages. And then we'll cover briefly why the leaderboard in-game is a bit scuffed. Uh, so if you're just starting out, some things you may want to do is you can slow the game down. There's controls in the top right, and you can go into the settings and enable even slower game modes. If you're dying a lot, you may just want to play on a lower in-game speed. You can still clear Fast 9 at like 1/4 of the normal speed if you're having trouble controlling your character. You can also enable manual level ups from that menu, which can be pretty useful for mitigating RNG. Um, when you are progressing to Fast 9, a lot of people seem to get discouraged. You will fail a lot of runs. There's a huge amount of RNG in the game. Uh, I assume we'll get buildings that let us mitigate this eventually, like more rerolls, free rerolls, locking items for the next selection. But right now, you are very much at the whims of the gods of fate. Um, yeah. But anytime you fail a run, you're still getting building materials and character experience points in both having high level buildings. They max out at level 5 in the demo, and leveling your character will help a lot in successfully completing a run. And when you're lower level, like say you're doing a fresh save run and you just reset your demo data, special balls will matter a lot more because you have a low amount of baby balls. Um, when you're higher level, it will be the opposite. You'll have so many baby balls, you'll be firing your special balls less often. And so items which affect them will make it easier compared to getting good balls. Um, but yeah, RNG is a huge part, and the balls are not very balanced right now. Like a single wind ball is basically makes the run twice as easy. It's that strong, and some of the other balls are pretty negligible impact. So which are the available characters? Warrior has nothing special. Itchy Fingers, I see a lot of questions about. Uh, he has no movement speed penalty while firing, where Warrior does, and it's pretty noticeable. Some people have described him as like stumbling. There's a boots item that negates it, but Itchy Finger gets it built in by default. Auto fire cannot be disabled. It's worded strangely in game, but basically the other characters can toggle manually firing, where it shows the wheel of baby balls and special balls, or auto fire. But Itchy Finger cannot leave auto fire mode, is what that means, that he continuously fires all balls. He also has Scattershot by default. This is the same as the Baby Rattle item. Um, and it's pretty useful actually, because it gives you a wider angle if you're aiming in the same place. Um, I guess it's worded as a downside, but for the most part, it's a pure benefit. And he also has double fire rate, which is very good. Yes. And the Repentant, the balls deal 5% more damage for each bounce. But when they hit the back wall, like the back of the stage, they will come back to you and pass through all enemies. A lot of people find Repentant easier in the beginning because it's pretty straightforward how to kill the boss with him. But he has pretty low HP and is harder for the higher fast difficulties than the other two characters. There's also a ton of questions on the Discord about baby balls and how they work. The basics of it is you get a number of baby balls equal to your leadership, and it's 1-to-1. The baby rattle item over here can up to double that count. If you toggle auto fire off, you can see in a ring like the count of baby balls before a special ball will fire, which you can do on Warrior and Repentant. Um, and if you have too many balls, you'll notice you actually throw special balls slower. This is mostly an issue on Repentant because Repentant has very good leadership scaling, but poor fire rate scaling. So it almost feels like Repentant is actually getting weaker as a level sometimes. Um, if you, whether or not to take Baby Rattle or Bow, which increases your fire rate, depends. You kind of have to look at your character in game, especially early on. Baby Rattle's incredible for all characters. But if you see your character like is rarely throwing their special balls and kind of always stuck in the firing animation, Bow can be worth considering. And conversely, if your character is always waiting around with nothing to do, the Bow's not going to be very good, and Baby Rattle will be much better to fill in that downtime. And fire rate also scales with dexterity in game. And the baby balls from leadership are separate from those generated by the egg sac ball, brood mother ball, or the following special passives like the tornado in a bottle, the bandage, the turret, and the slingshot. This one generates balls when you catch a special ball, or baby balls rather. This one generates baby balls when you heal. The turret continuously fires baby balls on a separate counter, and slingshot fires a baby ball every time you pick up a gem, but it only has a chance to proc the experience gem. So which balls should you be taking? I've sorted the unevolved balls into what they do. Generally, far and away, the best ball in the game for progression is Wind Ball. It provides crowd control, it passes through enemies, and the slow is massive. Like having a 50% slow gives you so much more time. It almost doubles the amount of time you have to kill enemies. It's just like, it's so different, like completing your very first Fast 9 with Wind Ball versus not having Wind Ball. There's balls that do area of effect, like Earthquake and Lightning do an AoE around them. And then Vertical Laser shoots a beam through the enemy column, and Horizontal Laser shoots a beam through an enemy row. And then there's also, I put Brood Mother here. Typically why I think it's AoE is because it can cause more balls to bounce off after the initial hit, or if you're using Spectral Cloak, it can generate more balls and cause more area damage, but it doesn't really help with the mini bosses. The pass-through balls are Ghost and Wind. They're really strong for progression. You should pretty much always take them early on. They become less good later when you're using Spectral Cape, but you probably won't be in the beginning. And Spectral Cape is the item which causes your balls to always pass through all enemies until they hit the back row and then start bouncing. They can still be good even with that because it helps you defeat the mini bosses. And then these balls I categorize as single target. Essentially, if you're struggling to the first and second mini boss, like the guy with the sword or the archer, you should consider taking one or more of these balls. And if you're dying to the wave after either of the bosses, where you're just getting overwhelmed by enemies, you should take more AoE and pass through balls or get wind. And the single target balls are bleed, poison, fire. Poison and fire apply a ticking dot. Bleed applies stacks, and anytime a ball hits them, it triggers the bleed stacks. So if you have a lot of baby balls, bleed will be better. And then I put egg sac here because it continuously occurs and doesn't need you to catch it, which can help in some scenarios where your balls are trapped and you need single target damage for tanky enemies or the boss. And then Iron Ball here just does double damage. It moves slower, but it's still better than a basic ball. And these they're not bad balls, but they're risky to take. Freeze Ball and Vampire Ball, on their own, they only have a chance to proc, and that chance is fairly low. So these will only proc a few times during a run without evolving them or combining them with an AoE ball. And then which balls evolve? Thanks to Set on the Discord, they provided this great chart that shows all the evolutions if you haven't found them all yet. I'll leave it on a few seconds so you can look at it. What are the evolved ball categories? This is something worth noting, is some balls lose properties they had before, like pass through or AoE, or their CC effect when they are combined. Like Blizzard loses both pass through and the slow effect if it's combined from freeze and wind. But if you're combining it with freeze and lightning, it doesn't lose anything, and it boosts that 8% freeze chance to a 100%. So it's like massively good if you're combining from freeze and lightning, but it's pretty terrible if you're combining from freeze and wind. And sometimes balls will gain CC, like Frost plus Ghost, the Wraith, or Frost plus Laser, or Frost plus Earthquake, or Poison plus Earthquake gets a slow effect, the same as Wind. So that can make each of the individual balls, like Earthquake and Poison, is pretty mid, but then Swamp is quite good because slows in general are just very powerful for progression. And then some balls like randomly gain AoE, like Fire and Wind, loses its pass through but gets a huge AoE. I think mostly you'll want to play around in the game with these and test out different ones to see which ones suit your play style, rather than exhaustively go over each one. Ones that I will mention are Soul Sucker. We mentioned the bandage item that throws a baby ball every time you heal. It's normally pretty terrible, but when combined with Soul Sucker, it will heal you 1 HP for every enemy it hits and passes through. And it's very strong when combined with that bandage. Mosquito heals you when it kills an enemy, and same with Mosquito Swarm, but they don't proc as frequently as Soul Sucker. So it can turn a pretty mediocre or bad passive into a very good one if you have it. But some of these you really have to be careful, like the Poison Gas and Thunderstorm. If you're combining from Wind, they lose the slow effect. Or Wind plus Earth for Sandstorm, it also loses the slow effect. So it gets an AoE blind, but generally you always want to slow. So you just have to be careful and think about what balls you have, if you're already applying CC, what you're lacking in terms of AoE and damage. And then in terms of single target balls, the only one I'll really highlight is the Frostfire. It applies a damage amp from all sources, which is really strong. Leech is also strong, but it's a weaker overall ball because outside of the mini bosses, it tends to take way too long to ramp. Instead of applying the bleed stacks directly, it attaches a leech to the enemy, which slowly generates them over time. And then these balls I say to avoid. I know some people like the shotgun, but typically they're worse than their combined, like having the 2 component balls. Like the radiation laser, it also applies a damage amp like Frostfire, but the targeting's extremely whack on it, and shotgun, the balls dissipate. And typically when you have Exec, you want it with Spectral Cloak. So the fact that the balls dissipate makes it a bit worse. And same with the mosquitoes, it nerfs Exec. And especially with Bomb, it gives a 3-second cooldown to your Iron and Fire balls, which on their own are great single target balls, and it makes a very mediocre, or like kind of bad actually, AoE ball. So you pretty much want to avoid taking that. So when you pick up the swirling rainbow, you get the option evolution, fusion, or fission. Which one should you be taking? Um, it really depends on what balls you have. Like we mentioned before, certain evolved balls lose their previous properties, like passing through enemies or slow. So it's worth trying out the evolutions, especially in lower fast difficulties, to understand what they do. And also worth noting that evolutions in general are more risky to take because you need to level them up again before you can fuse them. And they can still be fused, so they're in the pool and cause you to pick an overall number of higher balls compared to passives. So typically you only want one or two evolutions. You can technically fuse two evolved balls together, but it's rarely worth it to do that because it has such a high opportunity cost. Unless you're making some absolutely insane broken combination. Uh, and then typically you want to rely on fusions. They're their bread and butter. Um, really strong fusions for clearing are any AoE ball plus a pass-through ball. And this one you have to be careful and check the list, like what is in an evolution. Like wind combines with most balls, but it doesn't with laser. So combining wind with either laser through fusion is extremely strong, where a lot of the wind evolutions are underwhelming compared to just having the wind ball. AoE plus status effects can also be really good, like Earthquake Bleed. Again, some of them have evolution, so you have to be careful which ones you're taking. And then the weaker fusions are things which don't add a property, like mixing two single target balls together, like fire and poison is pretty mediocre compared to giving a status effect an AoE property or giving an AoE ball a pass-through property or even a status effect pass-through property. And one thing with fission is you want to always have 4 or 5 levels available when you select it. If you're using manual level ups, it's a lot easier to obtain. Every ball can be leveled to 3 and every passive item as well. So if you have, like, say, 2 items at level 1, you can get 4 potential levels from fission. If you have 3 balls at level 2 and 1 passive at level 1, you can get up to 5. It's just doing quick math. You can delay it until it's like at the very bottom of the screen and then run back to pick it up. There is a lot of RNG in how many fission outcomes. Like even if you do this to maximize your chances, you might still get 1 out of 5 3 times in a row. But it does help mitigate the RNG somewhat by managing it properly. And some people are having difficulty killing the boss. One is don't be afraid to slow down the game. Everything he does can be dodged and has pretty generous windows. If you're still learning it, just slow it down and learn his patterns and what moves he can do. And if you want to kill the boss quickly, you can take Spectral Cape, which is this item, the blue teal cloak. Only Warrior and Itchy Finger can be offered this item. Repentant does not have it in his drop pool, but it lets you just stand in front of the boss and shoot head forward. The risk, though, is against the first and second mini boss, it will destroy your DPS. So unless you have like strong single target build balls like bleed or poison or fire, or balls that do their damage without needing to like bounce through all the enemies in the back line and come back to you, like Wind, Ghost, Vertical Laser, Exact, because it despawns and the 3-second timer occurs, or the passive item Turret, which generates baby balls continuously. Taking Spectral Cape early might just end your run. So it's really situational, but it's generally safe to take it after the second mini boss is dead. You can aim at the left or right wall and bounce it to hit the crown in just one angle. For Repentant, you may need to do 2 angles. So like it bounces, hits the back wall, and then starts its pass through of the boss towards you. Um, for Itchy Finger and Warrior, you can sort of stand at the wall. For Repentant, you want to kind of stand towards the middle and aim past the arm. Uh, and it can be hard to focus on both where the arm is and dodging everything at the same time at first. But yeah, a lot of times the balls can get caught on the arm because he contracts and expands it. So it's important to make sure you're actually hitting the wall. And if you're Repentant, the balls are actually passing through the crown and you're in the right position. You can also walk past his arm on the left or right and shoot directly at the crown or directly at the wall above the crown, so it bounces back down into it. It's a bit high risk because he will aim certain moves towards you that become much harder to dodge, but it is also viable. What passive should you be taking in progression? This will differ slightly from when you're very far in, but generally always great items are Bottled Tornado because you have very few baby balls in the beginning, and Turret for the same reason. Baby Rattle, Warhorn, Slingshot, basically things which spawn more baby balls or make them do more damage. The AoE Scepter, which boosts all AoE damage, is also really good when you're relying on things like Holy Laser early on to be able to clear the difficulty. Things that you won't be sad about seeing, like they're never bad. The only downside is they take a slot from a good item, are any of the 4 daggers that give you crit from a certain direction, or the spear, which gives you crit for enemies in the same column. There's also the feather, which is pretty strong. It can take a while to get used to playing with it because it causes knockback with every attack, but it doesn't occur if you're moving or holding the move button. Or the silver bullet, which causes the first hit before the bounce to do more damage. Both of them are like solid damage increases, but not as strong as the others. Then there's the situational items, which can be strong. The bandage, which fires baby balls when you heal. Like we mentioned before with Soul Sucker, it's insane. Otherwise, it's like a wasted item slot. The icicle, if you just have the default unevolved freeze ball, it's not very good. But if you have Blizzard, Wraith, or Glacier, which has a guaranteed freeze, or the freezing laser, it's actually pretty strong, especially early on for clearing the waves. Oil Lantern is really situational. It tends to be kind of bad for clearing unless you combine fire with a ball that gives it AoE or pass through. Like typically you won't ignite many balls and get the bonus damage, but it's extremely good for the boss. But again, this also depends, like if you have some effect that you're consistently reapplying fire to the boss, because he cleanses debuffs after a very short duration. So you need some way to apply fire pretty continuously, like Spectral Cape. And then, like we mentioned earlier, the bow is also situational. It depends how many baby balls you have relative to your fire rate. And then the following are like risky to take, but they can have a big payoff. Spectral Cape, which we've talked about a lot because it's the best item in the game if you can take it without dying to the mini boss. The axe causes it. When the ball has not yet hit the back, it gets a damage penalty. And the damage penalty goes down with levels, but it's extremely steep at the start. So unless you can take it and then immediately level it up, it's extremely risky. And same with the headband. It makes your balls move way slower until they bounce, but it gives them a huge speed increase. And once again, it's at level 1, it's like bricking your run, but at the max level, it's pretty decent, especially if you have Spectral Cape. Like both of these items pair well with it. So you really want to think before taking either the rubber band or the axe. There's also one item, the Hourglass. This causes the item to do more damage on the initial hit, just like Silver Bullet, except it also has a huge penalty where each subsequent bounce reduces the damage, and eventually you have a damage penalty. So it's typically not worth taking it. outside of like very niche situations. And then the rest are just low value. The one on the far left lets you overheal, but that has basically no use. Uh, the other two are combined together. One's a little statue that moves forward and hits some enemies. It's like a very minor form of CC, and the heart-looking one just increases the statue's health. The Crown of Thorns can be okay, and same with Eye of the Beholder. One, when an enemy jumps towards you, since you got too close, it kills more enemies. So if you're falling behind, it can help you. But typically, if you've fallen behind where you're relying on Crown of Eyes, you probably lost the run already. And same with Eye of the Beholder. It has some like very niche use cases, but typically the situations that will help you, you're probably going to lose that run anyways. Also the same with the breastplate. It reduces the damage from incoming attacks. Magnet is kind of good if you want to be lazy. But it's for optimizing runs. Like if you want to get your first clears, it's not very good compared to just picking up the experience, since it will also magnet visions to you, and you may want to delay picking them up. And it provides no stat benefit like the other items we put in okay or great or situational. And then the boots, they make you move at a constant rate, just like Itchy Finger. Some people struggle with controlling Warrior, since your speed can go up and down and fluctuate rapidly. I would recommend just like lowering the game speed instead of taking the boots if you're struggling with that, to learn how to control Warrior better. It's pretty low value. It can help you get some experience you would have otherwise missed, but you should be able to get most of the experience, or at least the experience to reach the level that is maximally possible in the stage, since each level takes more than the next to get. So you're rarely going to miss a level. It just becomes prohibitively costly in terms of how much experience gems you need to pick up. Okay, so you followed all this advice and you've beaten Fast 9, but you want to go even faster. You can beat it again on the other two characters you didn't beat it with. This has a couple benefits. This Boneyard trophy over here will give status effect damage to everything for each character you've cleared higher fast difficulties on. And if you level Itchy Finger and Repentant, their associated building, the Sheriff's Office and Haunted House, will level up. Sheriff's Office has a gameplay benefit. You get gold per a certain amount of enemies killed. Haunted House doesn't, but it has a resource gathering benefit, which is more preparing for the full game to be released, since the saves will carry over. And then there's a couple tips that you can get even faster times. Like it says 5 minutes when you pick Fast 9, but you can actually go much faster than that. One is to keep the game speed always at the max difficulty, the 3 greater than symbols, throughout the duration of the run. Like practice playing at that speed and not needing to slow the game down. The other thing is you can keep leveling your character. There's not an obtainable maximum in the demo. I tested this by just giving the characters experience. Eventually it gets to a point where it would take like 40 hours to get that much experience, even speedrunning, just continuously speedrunning the stage, like not even factoring in going between the menus and stuff. But it's technically possible. So for realistically, it's like unlimited scaling. It just will get so slow, you basically won't level at a certain point, unless you literally played all day. And the other thing is to practice the different boss strategies and focus on passives that maximize your boss DPS at the expense of like AoE clear and wave clear. Also worth noting, when I mentioned that some balls are better for single target, most single target balls are only good for killing the mini boss. Because of the status effect cleansing. The only exception would be like Frostfire or Fire if you're combining with Oil Lantern, which can boost the boss against the damage against the skeleton boss at the end. You can also get something called a field cleared bonus, which gives you some gold, and it will immediately drop the next wave down. It's a pretty minor speed gain, and I think the speed gain might depend on like how close the next wave was to spawning anyways. It's pretty hard to track, but it's kind of noticeable if you get a lot of them. Realistically, you can only get 3 to 5 if you have like the very best items, unless you play on a lower difficulty, like you have a level 15 character and go back to normal. You can get a lot of field clears, and you'll notice the time drastically decreases. And you can also practice manual leveling, and you can right click to skip the fission animation, which takes a huge amount of time. Menuing at the current moment counts against the in-game time and the timer displayed at the end. So skipping the animations and making level selection quickly and reducing the number of level selections you make with manual leveling can all reduce the time. You can get well below 5 minutes, you can get below 4 minutes. I think realistically 3 minutes is around the barrier you can get right now, ethically. So which character should you pick? Should you pick any different balls, and should you change the speed? Itchy Finger is the best, like hands down. Warrior is not that far behind him, even though he doesn't get anything. Bleed is just a solid starting build ball, and he has good stat growth. And then Repentance the worst by a lot. It just has a lot of problems. One, it can't get Spectral Cape. That's a huge one. Two, it starts with Frostball, which on its own is way worse than Bleed and Fire until you evolve it. And three, it gets a very high leadership scaling, but it doesn't get high fire rate scaling. So the other characters, you'll notice a massive jump in power and how fast and consistently you can clear. Repentant, even like at a level 150, you can still die pretty easily if you don't get proper balls or play perfectly. And then sometimes your fastest time may not be on Fast 9. There is a difficulty scaling in addition to the game speeding up. You've probably noticed this if you've cleared Fast 9, that the enemies do like 4 times as much damage on Fast 9 compared to normal, roughly. And they also appear to have more health. I'm not sure on the exact numbers on the health scaling, because it's not as easy to figure out as the damage scaling, because you're also firing balls faster. So sometimes your fastest time may not actually be on Fast 9. I think once you can clear it consistently, like you're a high enough level and you're used to playing on that speed, Fast 9 should be the overall fastest. There may be certain points in the game where that's not the case for you or your particular character at that point in time. And the ball priority is mostly the same as just progressing through the game. The only difference is for Itchy Finger and Warrior, because you're going to be relying on Spectral Cape for very good times. You'll be able to dump all your baby balls and special balls, and they'll just bounce around in the back. And the baby ball damage will start to get ludicrous. The fact that it doesn't have diminishing returns with the baby ball count makes it kind of insane. And this eventually gets to a point where you can start dropping CC balls like Wind. Like it makes the game twice as easy, but you'll no longer need it. Though on Repentant, that's much harder to do. You can avoid evolving or fusing balls like you would have before, because they made the run easier, because you just won't need it. And like the time spent menuing compared to the time you would save with a better ball isn't worth it anymore. But this depends on how high level your character is and what passives you have in the run. So I mentioned stat growth a few times. I just leveled the characters up to 150. This does have every building at level 5, so subtract 5 from this. But this kind of shows the differences. Like for Warrior, he gets good endurance and strength, mediocre leadership and dexterity, and low speed and intelligence. which is a pretty good stat distribution, like no complaints. Itchy Finger gets high leadership and dexterity, uh, medium high endurance, and then like middling strength, speed, and intelligence. Uh, but leadership and dexterity just pair really well together, especially with his doubled fire rate. So he's probably also got the best scaling of anyone. And then Repentant, leadership and speed are the two that scale the most, and then dexterity and endurance, or dexterity, intelligence, and endurance are roughly next, and strength is his lowest stat. Which, yeah, it's just not a good stat distribution. It doesn't synergize well together or with his passive. So what passive items should you be taking to maximize boss DPS? For Warrior and Itchy Finger, it's the same. Spectral Cloak, that's pretty much mandatory. You can technically get by without it, but you almost always want it. And then 3, Baby Rattle, Warhorn, Oil Lantern. If you have a Fireball, you won't get offered unless you have a Fireball, which is mostly an issue for Warrior, who doesn't start with one. And the Axe. And then some alternatives that provide like a decent DPS boost versus the boss, just not as much as the others, are the Feather or the Turret. And then for Repentant, Baby Horn, Oil Lantern, again, you need a Fireball to get offered this. And the Axe, since you'll hit the back wall and pass through the boss. And then some alternatives is, it really depends. It depends what level your Repentant is, whether you should be taking Baby Rattle or Bow versus the boss. You really have to test this out and see if you have a continuous stream of balls, like the line's fully connected, then fire rate might be better. If there's like a lot of gaps in the line and Repentant is just waiting around, Bow could be, or Baby Rattle could be better still. And then the Icicle Shard, since he starts with Frost, if he evolves that ball, it's not bad for actually getting to the boss, because Repentant kind of struggles with that. With Warrior and Itchy Finger, it can pretty easily clear past the first mini boss without taking any items or levels. With Repentant, it's really realistically not possible to do that until you're very high level. And so you've learned everything and put it to the test. There's a speedrun.com managed by Kins. Thanks for running that. You can submit runs per any fast difficulty. So if you don't want to play on fast 9 and want to play at a lower fast, you can still submit your run. If you don't want to play Itchy Finger, you can play Warrior or Repentant and submit your times and not have to compete with the Itchy Fingers. You can also start with a fresh save if you don't like the leveling and progression system. There's also categories like get both gears, so clear twice back to back. And then if you have a new idea for a run, you can probably submit it, like getting all the evolutions, or some fun run idea like that, since other games have things like that as well. So good luck to everyone who chooses to participate, and have fun, and I hope you get good RNG. And the main reason you should submit here is the in-game leaderboard is not authentic, whereas speedrun.com requires verification. And we'll talk about that next. So you may have noticed the in-game leaderboard has times like 50 seconds, 152, 226, 247, 249, but the best on speedrun.com is like 320 and a 330 time. It's possible these 252 runs and even the 249 and 247 are all legit, like looking at their items. They have what you would expect from someone going fast. And even in the 320 run that's uploaded there, there's like 15 seconds of menuing. And the boss time could definitely be improved. You could get more field clears. There's a lot of improvements to be made on the 320 time. So I cannot say with any certainty that runs from 4th beyond are cheated, there were definitely some with lower times. One obvious thing is when you're cheating, and you don't pick up any passive items, it will pick 3 random passives, and they tend to be the same ones. It tends to show up as bow, oil lantern, and chimera eye. Not always though. Sometimes it just displays as white squares. Sometimes the items change when you view it. The game can't really handle it. And I can confirm for a fact the 50-second round is cheated, and I have it on my channel if you want to see what it looks like. But yeah, your stats can look like this, which we looked at our level 150 stats, and characters were just barely getting over 100 in their best stats sometimes. And these numbers can't even fit in the field. Like, they're too big. And the game will actually lag if you have them. So competing on the in-game leaderboard, unless you're doing cheating, it's not really the best. If you're not going for these very top times, I have no reason to believe like runs past the top 12 or so, there's any cheating involved. Like if you're still in the top 20 to top 50, you're probably competing with other legit players. It's only if you want to push to the very top and you're wondering what the hell is going on. Yeah, I will spill the beans. And so, why is everyone still itchy finger when they're cheating? Yeah, here's some examples. With Repentant, you can get a 103, Warrior 102, and then itchy fingers over 50 seconds. How is this still possible when his only benefits of like fire rate and speed don't matter when your fire rate and speed are both infinite, and he has no advantage? It's actually his scatter shot that makes him broken. Essentially, Repentant and Warrior, you still have to aim. You have to wiggle your mouse over them very rapidly to be able to clear all the waves in time. And then you have to kind of like bounce the ball, since you won't have any items or balls, or your balls will never even fire with how many baby balls you'll have. You kind of have to fire in different arcs for both Repentant and Warrior. Whereas Itchy Finger's scatter shot, it gives him a lot more flexibility that a stray ball will go and hit the boss. And this lets him kill the boss before it even shows up on the screen. Whereas the other two have to wait for him to walk down, which is like a 10 to 15 second animation. And there was a lot of questions like if field clear actually makes the game faster. It definitely does. Or like this 119 time was recorded on normal speed. Yeah, essentially in a game difficulty that's in theory 3 times slower than fast, it's only 20 seconds slower. And the main thing is just the boss not becoming targetable. Like his animation is still taking that, 15 seconds is now 45 or something. That's the majority of the time loss in playing in normal versus fast 9. So field clears definitely make a huge difference to time. I think that's everything I had to say. Yeah, thanks anyone who watched, and good luck speedrunning.